As a born and bred Salemite, I always get asked by foreigners as well as other uh, people around the country, what's the big deal with Halloween, right? And, it's a long story and it's complicated, but I can give you the beginner's rundown, kind of like the 101 course. And the first thing I really want to say is that it has zero to do with Salem. The whole thing infuriates locals, but we just kind of go with it. Um, so the whole witch thing in Salem is a shocking historical episode of religious and misogynist persecution. Since accusations could lead to execution, it was a very dangerous moment in history. There were class elements involved, the have-nots from Salem Village versus the more wealthy folk of Salem Town and so on, people who coveted neighbors' land and jumped at the chance to accuse them. A sort of racist and Christian Puritan fear of African influence and the dilution of Christian values. This whole kind of soggy stew of bizarre overreaction. Um, the scary costumes are actually an unrelated thing, and it comes from the Celtic folklore tradition, pagan tradition of scaring the dead back into their graves. So scary costumes, bonfires, all that. But this new thing has been years, centuries, in fact, in the making. Fast forward 300 years, and the landscape has changed both literally and demographically. The most notable thing to my reading, anyway, is that we, the current population of Salem, have completely outbred the early settlers. Irish, French, Canadian, Polish, other white-ish European Catholics overwhelmed the WASP locals, who are now almost as scarce as they made the indigenous owners of the land through conquest and genocide. In recent decades, of course, you have new waves of immigrants coming from the Caribbean, Central and South America, Southeast Asia, and more recently, Africa. So I think this displacement was a key factor in shaping our kind of treatment of that history. In the early years of this explosion of Salem as the so-called world capital of Halloween, there was this giddy euphoria that was disturbingly close to the Germans' post-war generation's feeling of what they called "Wir sind es nicht gewesen." We weren't the one who did it. We weren't the ones who did it. So we could kind of embrace it with this kind of cartoon slash shameful exuberance. Sports teams named after the witches, welcoming every sort of ridiculous, nominally Halloween-related absurdity, all in the name of tourism and making a fast buck for locals. And this has all continued, of course, and worsened, though mostly because it's kind of a runaway train wreck. Things take on a life of their own, and there's no going back. This is, like it or not, this is the new reality, and it can only be coped with, not stopped. So in the background, there has been some maturing, some self-reflection on the town's responsibility to the historical record, and now there are plenty of actual history truth-tellers mixed in with all the hype. And also it's no longer, overwhelmingly gory. People watching is the real current sport, and as likely as you are to see The Walking Dead or vampires or whatever, you'll see clever new editions of every possible kind, from Trump with an attached baby handing out classified documents downtown to a coronavirus, everything in between. So in short, it has become a carnival. But I think people can learn something from it. For me, the saddest part, or for outsiders looking in, is that the deep learning is as absent as it is generally for Americans. Well, maybe that's most humans, if you want to take George Santayana's famous warning, those who forget the past are condemned to repeat it. The wholesale conquest and ethnic cleansing in the name of profit, the obvious analogs in current history, provoke absolutely no drive to derail the current war-crazed national policy. And colonialism and imperialism that made Salem possible, founded Salem, rage unabated, as full-throatedly as ever, pillaging continent after continent, albeit under slightly different guises and more nuanced, justifying narratives. Newer immigrants, that's us, whose great-grandparents replaced the Pilgrims who killed the natives, now sit around in local bars and unironically spew this venom against the even newer immigrants who are somehow unworthy of human compassion. It's really pretty gross. So it's basically a big party that locals both dread and embrace every year, but none of us are ever sad to see it go. So, I have to say, it's kind of like Salem on Halloween is just like the real world, this merry-go-round of history. I see it as mirrored by that this downtown, this huge drunken circle of tourists and locals winding along downtown streets on Halloween and at 9 p.m., but only until 9 p.m. And the mounted police clop in to drop the curtain on this year's circus. So that's all it is. Now, if you don't mind, I will go off to nurse my pint and take a look at the crazies. Happy Halloween, everybody.